Welcome everybody to our live stream. I'm so glad you're here today. Want to just give a quick tech check in and make sure if you can hear me or see me, please drop that in the chat. We want to make sure that you're able to participate because today we are talking about how we can take shared ownership of well-being in the workplace. And the thing is, it's a pretty confronting, triggering thing for some people. Like, well, what do you mean? I give you a paycheck and we figure it out and you know your job and it should be fine. And the reality is that's not how it works anymore. So if you're here live with me, I would love, love, love if you could drop in where you're calling, where you're calling from. I sound like I'm on a radio show, right? Yep. Okay, cool. We got a yes. Not where you're calling from, but where you are. Where are you in the world? What platform are you on? How are you joining us today? I'm LIsa Duerreon. I'm the CEO and the co-founder of RLD Group, and we're on a mission to reboot Leadership Drive. And we look at that through the lens of three things: culture, burnout prevention, bottom line results. And you know the foundation of all of that? It's well-being, right? How well is your organization and how well are your people? So with me today, I've got two amazing guests who I've been collaborating with, and you've been hearing us talk for a while. And we've got Oakland here, we've got Colorado here. Yay, we're so glad you're here. So I'm going to invite them up in just a moment, and we're going to get right into the conversation. And your voice is going to come in too, because this is about all of us getting curious and sharing our lived experience. But I wanted to drop a moment and say, we've been going live for a little while talking about women in tech. And we started off talking about why is it important to help women stay in tech. And then we landed on feminine wisdom, bringing feminine leadership qualities into organizations. And in each of those conversations with you, the audience, and with ourselves, what's been bubbling up is how to create a workplace that works for everyone. And at the foundation of that, we realized well-being is the next conversation we need to have. So I'd like to invite Alenka and Rachelle onto the stage, and let's have this conversation. For those of you that don't know, Rachelle, Alenka, and I work together at RLD Group, and we also all run our own consulting firms. So we are modeling co-creation and collaboration together. And I'd like to invite both Rachelle and Alenka just to presence why you're here, why it's important today. Why does this conversation matter to you? Alenka, would you like to go first?
Thank you, Lisa. And I'm really so excited to talk about it. It is my living experience, my living journey as a woman in tech, that the more than half of the career I was living really in go phase, not really giving permission to feel well or really to work on myself. And only now I find out that in fact, I couldn't and I didn't want to give myself permission to stop and pause and really feel well. And at the end of this journey, right now, where I'm not, I figured out that probably a lot of women in tech, and I would say people in tech, they are in the same situation, that they would like to feel well, but on the other side, they have to go to reach the results and for the stars. And I would like to bring more awareness that we have both sides in us. We can feel well and we can work hard. However, we have to be aware how to bring those two poles together. And that's why it is important to share awareness for me at that moment. I was there, and I hope that there would not be so bumpy road for others in this place.
Mm. If anyone can relate to what Alenka is saying, anybody go, and probably not prioritizing yourself? Yeah, let's see. Sandra's having technical difficulties with the video. Sandra, if you can give us a little more insight, we're happy to troubleshoot it with you. We want to make sure you can see and hear us. And Liz, we're so glad you're here. Thank you for being with us today. Liz Becker is here, and we all, those of you who know Liz Becker, she cares about well-being. So I'm really glad you're here. Alenka, when you presence that, one of the things that I've been thinking about in this conversation is that we've been talking about burnout for a long time, right? We've been talking about burnout for everybody knows the word burnout. We've been talking about how to define it. And I think the invitation that we're making today is how might we shift the lens? And instead of preventing burnout, let's increase well-being. How might we shift the focus? And your example of go, and not pausing is a really great example of when you did pause, you shifted your focus. And so, Rachelle, maybe you can join in. Why is it important to be here today for you? And could you land a little bit on your definition of well being versus wellness and why it matters?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I'm excited to be here with you all to have this conversation. And this is really important for me because when I started my career in tech, I was a massive people pleaser, and well being was kind of at the very bottom of my list because I would have to focus on myself in that situation. That wasn't something I had capacity to do at that time because I just didn't have the tools and the skills to notice where I was giving a lot of myself away versus who I was like authentically and showing up as a well being, a person who was well in the world, especially in my work. Um, and on my journey of discovering what well being means, is like we have to first own it for ourselves and understand that that's a priority for us, and then seek resources around us that help us feel well in our lives as well. And I think our workplaces are a huge factor in that because so much of our lives are part of our work now. And I think that as far as wellness versus being well or a well-being, I think there's an action-oriented stance of a well-being. It's something that we are doing. It's something we're being and embodying. And I think our environments, our cultures can embody being well as well. That word's coming up a lot. Um, and so I think there's wellness is just kind of it doesn't feel like an active stance to me. It's not something we're actively doing or embodying. And I think well being really captures the essence of what we're trying to get at, in that it's involved in everything we do and how we show up and what we produce. And there's just such an active element to well being over wellness.
Mm. Yeah, I'm super curious if those of you who are here live and if you're watching the recording, drop in the chat. How do you define well being and wellness? What's your perspective on that? Because one of the things we know is when we bring our voices in, we learn from each other. And Rachelle, I really appreciate what you're saying about that. And what's interesting to me is this morning I was reading a post of somebody that I know on LinkedIn. And they were saying, I'm so excited. We're bringing the team together and we're going to work hard and play hard. And, we're just going to let the vibe of the group decide what we're going to do for our activities. And so I commented and I said, hey, heads up, the introverts on your teams, the people with chronic or hidden illness on your teams, the caregivers, they probably don't want to just go with the vibe because the vibe is usually dictated by the able-bodied, extroverted people on your team. And I gave the invitation, to have an intentional conversation with each person about how can we make this experience the best it can be for you, and what do I need to know to help you thrive as your leader? And the person wrote back and was like, "Well, I kinda just wing it and do group stuff, but your points are really well taken." And I got the biggest smile on my face because I was like, "Wait, we're gonna be talking about well-being today, and for those of you planning your offsites and bringing your teams back together, just know that every person's definition of well-being is slightly different, and each person's needs are different, and that's the beauty and the complexity of leading in today's world." So, I just wanna plant there's a statistic we have, 16% statistic, Randy, if you can pull that up for me. I think it's important for us to talk about this for a second, and Alenka, I'd like you to put your voice in here. So, I'm gonna pull it up with Randy. So 16% of employees are in a high state of well-being. This is from Great Place to Work. And Alenka, when you see the statistic and you're looking at this through your own lens, what would you like to presence? Like, I just gave my example of helping this leader as they're planning their offsite, right? How do we take that 16% up? What's your experience and what would you like to share when you think about this statistic and this alarming statistic?
I would say in any topic, also what is well-being, it's good to start with the evidence, what we are seeing, what we are measuring. And this is only one statistic. It's like some kind of symptoms that's showing up in our society. 16% only of working population feel well at work. That's alarming to me. And the reasons why is this so, we have to explore it. And whenever we have statistics, the first step is to explore what's going on behind the scenes. When we have evidence-based research, then it's easier to start doing actions, not only for ourselves, also for others. And we start with asking questions. And one of the question is, okay, what changes in our history that it's the percentage of people that they feel well is really decreasing? How is this compared with the past? What changes in our mentality? And in fact, who is responsible for well-being? We question about ourselves. So we heard Rachelle saying, it's our first job to be aware that we have to be open to well-being or understand what well-being is for us. But also on the other side, we have more and more influenced organization and the work that it's playing in our life. So how is that with responsibilities in both sides? And when we look at this statistic, it's just like we are seeing big pictures and we don't know what is behind that. That's why I always invite people to come up with a question and explore with yourself and with the organization what's going on behind the scene. And by the way, Lisa, nowadays that we are all on the hybrid work, what is behind the scenes if we are talking about your well-being that we don't see?
Alenka, I appreciate the analytical approach you always bring to these questions and how we look at the systemic level as well as individuals. And, for me, one of the things that I've been talking about lately, and people are probably seeing it on my LinkedIn as well, is that I've taken on another role in addition to RLD Group to be an ally and an advocate for a hidden disease that many women have, 1 in 11 women have, which I have. It's called lipedema. And the thing that I've learned behind what we don't see behind the Zoom screen is the energetic output that goes on for people who are trying to do their best at work when other things are going on: chronic illness, caretaking, mental health, back to school, everything in between. And the thing that when we think about wellness and well-being, until we can kind of own our own truth, which is what I've been working on the last year in just my own body and understanding, I think my well-being has significantly improved in the last year because I've been able to talk about it with you, with Rachelle, with the team. I've been able to, advocate and figure out how to manage my workday in a hybrid environment, right? Because I use a medical equipment at home. And so I think for me, the invitation for all of us, like you said, and to Rachelle's point too, is to be curious on how we define well-being, how are we modeling well-being, checking in with ourselves and our teams, because we all know we're looking over the financial well-being of the business, but that's only one component of it. And so I appreciate you asking the question of just what's going on behind it and how might we get more curious. And Rachelle, you're so good at questions about this too. Would you like to presence? What's a question you ask yourself or you ask a client when you're thinking about helping them kind of tap into really ascertaining what their well-being is? What comes to mind?
I don't know if I have a specific question on the top of my head, but what comes to mind for me is here comes a question.
Yep.
How might we open the dialogue so that it's not on one small group's shoulders to figure out what well-being means for the whole organization? And I think that what I've witnessed is it feels like wellness programs are one-way communication. Like, here's a page, it's self-service. If you have an issue, it's on you to go fix, or take this survey and then we'll tell you about the results. And there's no open dialogue of like having conversation of what well-being does mean for all of us. As you said, it's very complex. We're all different. We have different needs. There's always different things going on behind the Zoom screen. And if we can get the voices of a lot of representation in organizations, then that allows us to all have a little bit of more ownership in the programs, as well as just enriching it for all of us because we have the open dialogue and more voices adding to the collective wisdom so that we can create outcomes that support more of us and hopefully eventually all of us.
I really appreciate what you're saying. And the thing that comes to me, having spent decades in human resources myself and having done those surveys and written up those slide decks and reported back, right? I've been there, guilty, right? What happened for me over time was brave employees would come to me and say, yeah, thanks for that summary of 82% of you. 82% of us are fine, but the rest of us aren't. There were so many times people come to me and ask for support with childcare, on-site childcare, to improve their well-being, the commute, right? And we were never in a position to be able to do that. And I really started to realize, wow, we put all this responsibility on the HR leaders to fix. And what would it look like if we created the space and we gave HR leaders a chance to actually be curious without having this moral obligation to solve it all, but to actually be in conversation and to coach and guide versus have a new policy or a new program rollout? And Alenka, the things that you talk about so much time at the system level, all the way down to the individual, I just want to make sure we bring your voice into this. And then I'm going to look at the chat. We're going to bring voices in from the audience too. But with what Rachelle's saying, with the one way, data collection and reporting back, and this is what wellness and well-being looks like at work for us. What's the invitation at the organizational system level and down to the individual leader?
As you mentioned, well-being in organization, is it complex and it's system problem or challenge, I would say. And it's opportunity to invite all voices to see what is really going on one hand, on the individual level. So the leadership in the organization can meet the employees where they are at. And they can do that only if they invite voices and they are really open to listening what's going on. I'm not talking that you should invite everyone in organization, but for sure the key stakeholders on all levels to participate. And the first step is to help individuals to really be aware of well-being. So when individuals, they have awareness what well-being means for them, they can start working or exploring what's going on in their life. However, on the other side, there is organization leadership that they have to listen very well and really create the ecosystem, I would say, or the principle, the guidelines, the strategies for the organization that the employees that they are most of the time working, they can thrive and they can bring the whole self to work. So it's not one or the other, they are both. Mm-hmm. And nowadays that we are really becoming identity with our work, the ownership organization becoming much bigger. Not like in the past that we have to care for our own well-being. Now it's a big ownership part of the organization and leadership to really listen and participate in co-creation of well-being for the individual. So there are both sides. As we talk about individuals, we have to hire the awareness and work for ourselves, especially on the leadership level, and also organizations that they have to define or create processes in place that the people can thrive.
Yeah. When you say that, what came to my mind was when I burnt out, I very much in the beginning, you get really cynical and you're not able to function. Your brain doesn't work. You shut down, like your reserves are gone. And I was like, oh, my job stinks and this organization doesn't care. And I was pretty angry, and I just felt like I wasn't being set up for success. And as I rebooted from burnout, I realized I was giving my power away. I wasn't having boundaries. I wasn't influencing for more headcount or more budget. I was just kind of being in a place of lack of power, right? In my own agency. And I think that's the same thing with well-being. Like, how many leaders have I coached over the time to say, take that lunch break, take the lunch break, right? Take the nap. Let's breathe together. How might we have a walking meeting? Like some of the basic things that we give our power away. And one of the greatest gifts I received from both you, Alenka, and you, Rachelle, is how we always check in at the beginning of our meetings on what needs to be said or presenced. Rachelle usually walks us through some breathing. Alenka is always giving appreciation for what is beautiful in the world. Like today, it was the flowers. Like she's drawing us into being present. And I think as leaders, one of the things that we can do is, instead of thinking like that's, the board's problem, or we just have to make the shareholder number, really thinking about how can you create well-being for your team and for yourself where you actually do have control. And I'd like to bring up a couple of comments and bring some voices in. So I see it says LinkedIn user on here. I know there's a human being behind it, but I can't tell in my chat. It says, I like the active form of well-being as a way or path of pursuing wellishness versus the absolute nature of wellness. The active form of well-being is a path of pursuing wellishness. This is so interesting because, don't we get into black and white thinking? I know I do. Anybody else? This or that? I mean, that was my path to burnout. So thank you for that comment. And if that inspires a comment, please drop it below. And then here's another one that says, those in my profession ask some questions that assess for agency and authentic positive effect. Right? Yeah. And so back to my comment too, like, where are we giving away our power and where do we have agency? Is there a question? So it said LinkedIn user, so I don't know who this is, but is there a question that might inspire conversation right now with that as the backdrop? I just want to give a chance for people to type in. And I think one of the questions that I think we still need to really double click on is how do you define well-being? Because each of us does it differently. For me, one of the things that I recognize is that I have to pause in between things. When I'm feeling well and having well-being in my life, I'm pausing more and I'm not giving myself back-to-back pressure. And that's an intentionality that there are days I'm better at than others. There are days I'm better at than others, for sure. All right, so let's just see what other comments are coming through. I want to go to the other side of the statistic that blew my mind. There's a statistic about $322 billion. So if we can pull that up, I'd like to invite Rachelle and Alenka into a conversation, because what's the cost? Not the hard cost. What is the intangible or the hidden cost, if you will, with this estimated $322 billion because of burnout being such a significant contribution? So we all have our own burnout experiences. And I'm wondering, with that lens, Rachelle, can you share some of the hidden costs that don't just show up with this really big number that Gallup and WorkHuman are sharing? What's underneath that? What's your perspective?
I find it interesting that we always have to equate things with money. I mean, it's the society we live in, it's the culture we live in. And so money really speaks to us. And when we see a number like $322 billion, that's like mind blowing. And also, I think it's something that we should look at of what's behind, as you are asking, what's behind our need to equate everything with money. And part of our measures of success in this country are GDP. And so a lot of policies and things are written to support that growth in GDP. And a book I was reading, I had it next to me, but I don't anymore, but it was essentially Evolving the Collective Well-Being for All, talked about how if we had different measures of success, then we could elevate policies around well-being for individuals. And I think so we have to look from the top down of what are we valuing? What measures can we use to see differently? And maybe I'll open up the conversation and the things we're looking at to be more than money. And what policies can we write to affect our well-being or take it more seriously, so that it doesn't have to equate to dollars always, because I think our well-being and dollars, there is such a spectrum in between those that we can fill in to support people's well-being that will have a huge impact across the board. And so, like, looking at it from the governmental policies that are written, can we involve the collective well-being in those and have some measures of success there, all the way down to corporate and all the way down to how we treat ourselves. We don't typically write ourselves policies, but what are we looking at in our day-to-day lives to enhance our well-being? And I think that spaciousness you were talking about, of taking a pause I think in corporate America, especially in tech these days, everything is so fast and we have no time to breathe. And in that spaciousness could invite a lot of activities that could allow for more well-being to be present.
Mm. Every time I listen to Rachelle, I'm always inspired because it's like, she's like, listen, let's just change the whole thing. Like, we're not just talking about money, people. Like, let's look at it through a different lens. And the lens, like with our glasses, the lens we have on is where we look. I typically use these numbers to wake the leaders up at the senior level so we can have the compelling conversation. And I think what you're saying, what landed for me, Rachelle, is this and. Of course, they're going to care about the money and what else, right? And when you look at it through that lens, what else can be possible? And even yesterday, I was coaching a client, and the first 15 minutes we were talking about how's your sleep, how's your hydration, what's your iWatch telling you about your heart rate, how you doing, right? And that's not in the 322 directly correlated to that individual. That individual's like, should I call the doctor? Should I take a day off? Like, how am I okay? Am I okay? And I think sometimes we lose sight of that because that number is so big. It's like, what could we possibly do about that? And you're inviting us to look at it through this different lens. And so, Alenka, what would you like to add to that? And when you think about this number, 322 billion lost productivity, what are some other hidden costs we can be looking at where we might have more agency to control rather than just, well, that's too big of a number, never mind. What are your thoughts on this, Alenka?
I'm so much supporting the thoughts that Rachelle brings to the table. I would like to be a little bit more specific. I work with the organization a lot of the process optimizations and many times and effectiveness or efficiency. And what we find out many times, that's how much it is inefficiency in the process. People, they are working so many hours. They always say they are working so many hours. They work hard, but still the productivity and efficiency is very low. So what's going on? And there was the latest research done then when people work only 4 days a week. In fact, the efficiency grows up. Effectiveness, because people, they feel more inspired, they feel more focused on the work. If you are tired, if you are burned out, that's a lot of idle time where you do not work efficiently, or you don't even work because you are completely out with your thoughts. And many times the leadership, they are aware that they are those hidden costs, but the problem is so complex that many times that they are not go there and measure it. They are not seeing it as, if we would give people more time that they can be and enjoy with the family, they can be more productive for the time that they are really working. So that's why the conversation with 4 days a week is so evident indicator that when you have time for yourself and even for your hobbies, your creativity grows up, your focus grows up. So you know that you work focus on the problem that you have and that you can have time for yourself and your family. That is just one specific example that I see a lot of corporates, they are not going there because it's so ingrained the value of working hard and go, instead of saying we have to be efficient and effective for the work that we are doing.
Anybody feel that one? Yeah, let's see if there's any comments coming in on working hard is not the badge of honor that it used to be. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the recipe for burnout, lost productivity, and the opposite of what well-being is. I mean, there's so much to what you're saying right here. And yep, well-being is completely personal. So for one person, working hard 4 days a week is great. For others, it's like part-time each day. Everybody has different needs. And listen, that's not easy for the leaders. They're like, okay, can we please have something we can hang our hat on and make real and like count on? And I'm just going to say that one of the things we need to think about is the model that we have at RLD Group is called firm leadership. And firm leadership is really these power skills, if you will, of flexibility, intuition, resilience, and mindfulness. And when you can turn those on inside you as a leader and in your organization, it's not so overwhelming to think, well, should it be 3 days in or hybrid only, or what should we do? Because you're actually resourcing yourself, your executive functioning, and your creativity to let your team and you decide what is necessary right now, right? The thing we know is everything keeps changing and people have change fatigue. So it's like, why would I take on this topic? It's too much. And if you can just figure out, and we can help you, of course, if you want to talk about it, we're all here. Alenka, Rachelle, and I talk about firm leadership every day. Flexibility, intuition, resilience, and mindfulness are the key components to figure out how to crack this code. And one of the things that Alenka and Rachelle have been designing, I think we should presence today is, would you guys just share a little bit about the workshop that you've been designing with this in mind? And we haven't launched it. This isn't an offer today, but we've been working on how might we take these conversations into organizations and help bring those voices and amplify everyone's thoughts and ideas to be able to empower leaders to make these types of choices as firm leaders. So, Alenka, anything you want to say about the workshop you've been designing? Or just the idea, like how might a leader do something right now without even taking the workshop? But of course we can help.
The great motivation is to bring this conversation. It's in the spaces, it's so-called dense places. That dense spaces, one of my colleague leader in tech, he shared with me that everyone is aware that well-being is a problem or is a challenge, but there is no space to talk about that or to have a conversation about that. That's why we are bringing this conversation to these dense spaces on the safe, very welcoming way. And we just open the conversation with questions: what well-being means for you, how we can co-create the well-being together, and how we can build more resilience in ourselves to understand our well-being. And as Lisa said, being firm leader in the space of work. Everyone has the opportunity to be a firm leader. It's not only for leadership. I believe that self-awareness and self-leadership and firm leadership is for everyone, even from the employee that's working in the plant. Everyone has to be like that. It's 2-day workshop where we have this conversation and where we co-create together with the people and leadership. And I would like to invite also Rachelle something to share.
Yeah, I appreciate so much what you're saying, Alenka and Rachelle. If you could add in your perspective on it, as well as, what's a question that people can hone in on right now to help themselves as they're, grappling with this and thinking it through. So let's talk about the workshop that's being designed, as well as something tangible they can do right now.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a privilege to work on this workshop with you both. You inspire me so much. And I think at the basis of it is bringing in voices and more representation from organizations and being able to create something from that. This is such a huge topic that we need a lot of voices. The command and control structure isn't supporting us in where we are anymore. So I think bringing in that collective wisdom and more voices and more brains and hearts to help solve or even move the needle on bringing more well-being is such an important factor. And I think something people, especially leaders right now, can do is invite more spaciousness into your day so you have a moment to pause and breathe and resource yourself so that you can be present not only for your own work, but for the people you're supporting in your organizations.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's just say, yes, invite more spaciousness to ourselves, much like the conversation I had with my client yesterday on how might you even reorganize your day to give yourself that breathing room, and how to be in conversation and bring more voices. So Rachelle, Alenka, and I have been in conversation of how might we support organizations with this. We can go live. We're going to be collecting data. We also know that those conversations inside your organizations matter. And what Rachelle, you just said specifically around the command and control, it doesn't work anymore, is so critical because that's not getting you the answers you need. And Alenka, to you talking about the dense spaces and allowing the spaciousness and the voices to come through. I'm just really honored to be in this space right now with you both and to be able to have something tangible that we can give to the audience and say, hey, we can help you. You can do it your own. Play this video back for your team, have a conversation, bring us in and we'll consult and work with you too, right? Because in it together is like, I guess, the hashtag I'd want to leave us all with today. But if you want to bring the conversation into your organization, we're here. We would love to do that. We'd like to honor and support you. We appreciate everyone's comments today, even defining well-being. It's such a topic that people don't want to touch right now, yet it's critical. And I think I'd just love to leave it with Alenka and Rachelle. One thought or one idea or what you're most inspired by. What can you say to close us out today to leave our audience more resourced and grounded than when they got here? Rachelle, we'll start with you.
Perfect. Thank you. What an opportunity. I would say just inviting in that spaciousness. Look for the small window. Can you allow 5 minutes for yourself in between meetings, or before you start the day? Can you give yourself 30 minutes to just presence yourself? Look at what you're doing to support yourself throughout the day. Are you eating lunch? Are you hydrating? Are you moving? I know I get caught up in sitting at the screen and not stepping away from it. So being really mindful about how you're spending your day and looking at how you might improve it just by 5% today.
I love that. One small action. Move, hydrate, and look at your schedule, right? I love that. Thank you, Rachelle. Alenka, what is your one small action or inspiration, appreciation you'd like to share with our audience today?
Start to be more curious what well-being means for you. And whenever you are triggered during the day, just pause, notice, and choose to have some moments for breathing. Whenever you allow yourself to pause, then you have more time to really look inside and to be aware, where is your well-being? How are you feeling? What do you see? How do you feel?
I love this so much. The pause, notice, and choose framework is something we all do. And Alenka, I really appreciate about you how you bring that pause into the conversation. When you're around people that are modeling this for you every day and doing the work, it's really inspiring, and you can do it even easier because you have role models. So hopefully what you saw today is something that you can bring forward. Pause, notice, and choose. Take the 5 minutes. Make sure you're breathing. I think for me, the thing I'd like to leave us all with is that don't do this alone. What we're talking about requires accountability, support, friendship, right? Don't do it alone. Follow us. We'd love to share more thoughts with you. We're going to continue to go live. We're going to continue to, unpack this as you will. We started with women in tech to feminine leadership qualities to well-being, and we're just getting started. So thanks for joining us today. Alenka, Rachelle, it's an honor to be co-creating with you right here all the time, every day. And to all of you that tuned in today, thanks for being with us. We'll talk to you soon.